All right. Welcome to the Sub Hub podcast. I'm Dani Moreno.
I'm EmKay Sullivan.
And today we are going to do a deep dive into some series in our trail running and mountain running space, especially if you're a sub-ultra runner or someone who's interested in sub-ultra distances. These are the series that we recommend that you check out. And we're going to kind of highlight the overviews, the pros and cons. But even beyond that, we're going to tell you how you can qualify for a USA team to be at the World Championships this year, which also is in conjunction to a series connected to the World Mountain Running Association.
Yeah. So should we get started with the World Mountain Trail Running Championships? There's so many different, we'll talk with the World Championships.
Yeah. So and know that we're going to say the world championships probably a billion times. So maybe grab a drink and turn it into a drinking game. Water, preferably, because you will be drinking a lot with all the times we say championships. But EmKay's going to start with that.
Yeah. So the World Championships have 4 different events, technically 5 if you include the U20 race as well. So the first day is the vertical mountain race, which for those of you who don't know is a vertical kilometer-ish race. So you have to gain 1,000 meters, which is around 3,300 feet in around 3 miles. It's crazy fast, crazy hard. But to qualify for the US team in this event, the Sunapee Scramble is your one and only option for qualification. That race happens on April 29th. And that's in New York, right, Dani?
Yeah, somewhere on the East Coast.
Yeah, somewhere on the East Coast. Sunapee Scramble, top 4 men automatically make the team. For women, it's only top 3, and that is because our Allie Mack was the world champion last year, so she gets an automatic bid to the World Championships in 2023. And they do not take anybody outside of that. They only take 4 people on the team. So next day is the 40-kilometer short trail race. I laugh at that every time.
At the World Championships, not at Sunapee.
Oh, yes. Sorry. At the World Championships. So I laugh at this every time because 40K is not short.
And that's in quotations too.
Yeah. But it's okay. So for the 40K team, the US takes 5 athletes. The qualifying races for that, one of which has already happened, is the formidable 50K. They take top 2 men and women from that race. So already on the team are Kimber Maddox, myself, Jonathan Aziz, and Craig Hunt. The next race for qualification to the World Championships on the 40K team is the Breakpoint Trail Marathon. And that is on May 6th. Again, top 2 men and top 2 women make the team. And then there is 1 resume spot available for that team as well. And resumes are due on April 15th for the 40K team. Did I miss anything on the 40K, Dani?
Nope. I would just preface that it's really in quotations because some years it's like a 35K. This year it's closer to like a 45K. So yeah, just don't get confused by the word short. It is usually a 4 to 5 hour race.
And maybe even longer this year because there's almost 12,000 feet of gain over the course of 45 kilometers.
Yeah, it's a very beefy race this year.
Yeah. And then not a sub-ultra, but we'll include it anyhow. The 80K long trail race is the 3rd day at the World Championships. And the qualifying race for that is Lake Sonoma 50 miler this year, which is on April 8th. And they take the top 3 men and women from that race. And then the remaining 2 spots on both teams will be filled with resumes. And the resumes are due on April 8th, which is the day of the race. And then our last sub-ultra race for the World Championships is the Classic Up Down Mountain. And that qualifier is also at Sunapee Scramble, but it's on April 30th. So it's the second day of that race. And it's top 4 men and women qualify for the team, no resume spots. And the classic up down, for those of you who might be confused because we have a short trail as well, is an 8-mile race, at least for qualifying. I don't know what the specifications are for the race in Austria, but it's an 8-mile race, and you run up and you run down. And that's what it is. And then for U20, for those of you who are young enough to apply, that is resume spots only. And those are due on April 15th for men, or men. I was going to call them boys, but some of them are over 18. So you have to have run under 16:45 for a 5K on the road or a cross country course. And for the women, you have to have run under 19:30 for 5K. And you have to have a recommendation letter from a parent, guardian, or coach. And for everyone involved, for the US team, you must be a current USATF member, which just means that you have to go onto the USATF website, sign up for a membership, pay for a year or 4 years, whatever you want to do. It's pretty easy, but I think normally you have to be signed up before the race, just so you know.
Yeah, that's normally how it is. And usually, at least the races I've done in the past, is you'll get like a different bib like color if you're an USATF member or not. And then also with the classic up and down, it's actually 2 laps each that are about 4 miles. And the same with the World Championship. Yeah, up, down, up, down. So they should do up down times 2.
And they alternate that, right? Like depending on the year, it's either all up and all down, or it's up, down, up, down. So this is an up, down year.
Yes, exactly.
And I failed to mention that the World Championships this year are June 6th through 10th in Innsbruck, Austria. So that will be really cool if you want to qualify. These are the races that you go to. And then at the World Championships themselves, we wanted to talk a little bit about how the team scoring happens and anti-doping and stuff. Do you want to take that, Dani?
Yeah. So this is actually a more recent change. Just the last time that I was on a USA team was in 2019. And at that time, all of the teams did it by points. But as of last year at the Thailand Championships, now it's that, and this is going to get confusing, everybody, but the mountain races, which are the 2 shortest races, but aren't called short, they are by points. So that is the VK and the classic up down mountain. Whereas the trail races, the short trail, which again should actually be called medium trail, and the long trail are by time. And I think the reason for that is sometimes trail races could get a little bit spread out. And so this kind of provides another incentive factor for the athletes to be pushing the entire race versus kind of like potentially getting a comfortable position for their team. And so, that is by total time. So that's actually, I think, a really good introduction or change to the rules in the last cycle of the championships. And then we are all a big fan of anti-doping, and WMRA actually does utilize WADA, which there's always room for improvement, but right now that's probably the best organization for anti-doping. So if you place, I believe it's in the top 5, I'd have to be fact checked on that just based on past championships, then you will get tested for doping. And then something on the website is it does say there's testing out of competition. I think, again, that would be the premium standard. I don't know if that exists in the world of mountain running, though WADA does do that for track and road. But it's just nice to know that potentially that could be on the way, or maybe that's new this year, which would mean that people that make the teams for their nations would be potentially doped beforehand and then out of competition past the championships.
And out of competition testing, for those of you who don't know, basically you have to sign up and get educated on it, but you have to let them know where you're going to be all the way throughout the year. So like, I'm going to be at my home these 2 months, but then I'm going to be in France for this month, and they can show up and knock on your door at any of those moments and ask you to take a drug test. So that's what out of competition testing is.
Yes. And as far as, again, qualifying, as EmKay mentioned, there are races where you could qualify, and then you probably heard her say resume a few times. And so basically what you do is you send the team managers, which is normally Nancy Hobbs is one of them, you send them your resume. And what a resume is it includes all of your best results typically. I would recommend maybe include a blurb about yourself, why you want to be on the team. If you don't have a ton of trail results, include road and track times as well, just so they can try and figure out where you potentially would be. And what typically helps those resume spots is if you go and run one of the qualifying races and say you're like one spot out, from my understanding is those people are given priority because they made an effort to try and make the team in person. So if you're a person who placed third or fourth or fifth, you're going to have a bit more weight to your resume. Some other things that may help are international races, proving that you have that international experience, not so much of doing a result on the day, but that you can travel and race and that you can like get used to a new zone. These are just conversations I've had with them and other athletes as to what potentially would like help your resume to get picked. But yeah, I would say if you want to make the team, number one thing is to go to one of these qualifying races or selection races. And then if that doesn't work out and you still want to make the team, then submit the resume. But I wouldn't try to solely just rest your laurels on the resume if you really want to make the team. And then EmKay, why should people want to be on Team USA or just any of their nation's teams?
I just think it's a great opportunity to be able to like wear a Team USA or other country jersey and represent your country on such a large stage. And there was also, I think a lot of people have been like wary of the world championships and the US championships for a while, just like based off of competitiveness and stuff. But last year there were some studies done. I don't know if you saw these, Dani, that they were putting out those graphs that the World Mountain championships were just as competitive, if not more competitive than like UTMB, Western States, like Sierra Zinal, I think was on there too. And like, it was up in the top 3 for both 100K distance and I think like the short trail distance. So the competition, and this is based off of people's ITRA and UTMB scores. And so the competition is like really good now. And yeah, I just think it's such a cool thing to be able to represent your country. And so if you're into that, I guess do it. And another point about resumes is that the qualifying window that they're looking for the resume spots for the 40K and 80K is races between January 1st and the end of the resume date. So like April 15th for the 40K and April 8th for the 80K. And for the 40K, they will put a considerable amount of weight on the Breakneck Point Marathon top 10 finishers because it is a US championship race.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can definitely second the why of wanting to go to the World Championships. I've been fortunate enough to have earned my spot 3-4 times now, and it's just such a surreal experience. You will get outfitted in all the Team USA gear. You get a suitcase. You just have hats and all this stuff, like more USA gear than you would ever have hoped for in the best way possible. And then what's nice too is USATF will try to support you as much as they can to get you to the championships. So if you potentially are a runner without that financial support from your sponsor, know that you will have some support from USATF and it won't just be out of your pocket. And that includes travel to and from the race as well as accommodations. And then usually they have meals like through the hosting organization. And to the competition aspect, I really think it's going to be even more competitive this year because it's in Austria. And so some people may have not been able to make the trip to Thailand due to other series or just their work schedules, because that is a lot of time out of one's schedule. Whereas Austria, I just feel like a lot more top runners are going to go there this year than there already was last year.
Yeah. And it's not in direct conflict with any other series this year because it's in June. Last year's championships were in November, and it was very close to other series championships. And that was quite the issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right. So that is how you qualify for the World Championships. And one last thing to note there is some nations, this is strictly for the USA team. Some other nations just have one race where you either make the team or not, even for the 40K and the 80K teams too. And then if you're not able to make it, sometimes there's a petition process. So having the resume spots, I think, is really unique to the US to already have that baked in to selecting a team member for that short trail 40K.
Yeah. So the next series that we're going to cover is Golden Trail, and I'm going to let Dani do a lot of this one just because she's been very active in the Golden Trail the last couple of years. She's always also been to the final the last 2 years, and just the last 2 years, right?
Yeah. Do you want to actually do WMRA first?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Just because it's, yeah, we'll do that one and then we'll do Golden Trail, only because WMRA has a weird connection to the World Championships, which we were just talking about. So WMRA stands for World Mountain Running Association. The president, I believe he's a president, is Jonathan Wyatt right now. I believe he's from New Zealand, and he's been recently the president for like the last 4 years or so. But essentially they have their own race series, which this year has 18 races, and that's made with, most of them are gold label, and then there's a couple silver label. And so you get more points for the gold label races. A couple of races, though, also kind of cross different series, like Broken Arrow, for example, the VK and the 23K are part of WMRA, but the 23K is also part of the Golden Trail National Series, which we'll get into next. Sierra Zanal is another one where that's part of the Golden Trail World Series. So as you can imagine, you get a really unique mix of athletes at these races in particular who may be kind of not racing against each other as much because they're committed to one series or the other. And so I think that's why Sierra Zanal is especially competitive each year. And then this is scored where if you get first place, the more points you get. And then at the end of the series, the first place person of the World Cup is what they call it, gets 5,000 euros. Then it goes 3,000 euros, 2,000 euros, and it pays all the way down to 10th place. And this series, I would say, always attracts kind of like a unique, or I wouldn't say unique, but just like a very specific group of athletes that return year after year. And it's typically athletes who also go to the World Championships year after year. And I believe what's kind of interesting with these races is it's also connected to IAAF rankings, which if you're like an athlete who also runs on the roads and stuff like that, that ranking can help you in potentially some other scenarios.
Yeah. And the connection to the World Championships in terms of ranking is that actually all three of the 4 World Championship races, so not including the 80K team, are considered higher points towards your WMRA score than even a gold label WMRA race. And they score all the way through top 20, which for a gold race, they score through top 15, and a silver label, they only score through top 10. And there's a bunch of different categories that are included in this scoring system. But the World Championships are heavily weighted in your WMRA ranking towards the end of the World Cup.
Yeah. As a coach, MK, what type of athletes would you recommend do this series over maybe Cirque or Golden Trail?
That's a great question. I would say probably athletes who enjoy more like the VK or classic kind of racing, because a lot of the races are all uphill and shorter and more technical, but still really fast. So yeah, I would say definitely the athletes that kind of prefer the sub ultra.
Yeah, I would say so too. I would also say like this series doesn't have as much live coverage and extra fluff going on. And so if an athlete wants to compete internationally but isn't sure how they're going to deal with all that kind of public pressure that surrounds some series like the Golden Trail, I would highly recommend WMRA just to get like your feet a little wet, see if you like mountain running, you like VKs and stuff like that. There used to be a VK series, there isn't one anymore. So like MK, this kind of fits that niche. And yeah, it's just, I don't think, just based on the results I've seen, I don't think it's as deep. So it potentially can help someone build confidence. With that being said, if I jumped in one or two of these VK races, I would probably get my butt kicked. But if you were like a VK specialist, I would suspect you may find yourself like in the top 15 or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is just all my speculation based on the names that I know. I know that the trail space is filled with a ton of people that I don't know. So
Yeah. And I wonder if like it being less like deep might be because it crosses over with so many different series. Like maybe it kind of dilutes it a little bit.
yeah. And the prize money.
Yeah. The prize money is less than most series.
Yeah. And I think sponsors also like that public eye aspect too. And so they're like, well, if you went to the Golden Trail, you might be on TV for 5 minutes. Whereas WMRA, I just find myself always struggling to find their results sometimes.
Yeah. And it's on you to post about your results for your sponsor. And so
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's some really good stuff going on there. Obviously, the prize money is a lot less than some of the other series, but a great place to get your feet wet as far as VK and shorter stuff and running internationally, which I think is a huge plus.
Yeah, definitely. And then back to the Golden Trail. So the Golden Trail has two different sections, I'll call them, I guess. They have a national series and a world series. And for the national series, there are 11 different some of them are single countries, some of them are general areas. So you've got France is on its own. USA and Canada are together. Spain and Portugal are together. So it kind of depends on Mexico is by itself, which makes sense. So it just kind of depends on the area, but there are 11 series within the national series. And for qualification, I think each series has like 4 or 5 races in them, in it. And so you have to run for national series, you don't have to run a minimum amount. It's the top 3 men and women from each of those races get invited to the Golden Trail final, but I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, Dani, they are in a separate race than the Golden Trail World Series athletes, correct?
Yes, correct. You're all in the same race, but your rankings are separate.
Yeah.
And the national athletes can displace the Golden Trail World Series athletes.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But you're still in a different ranking.
That's awesome. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. I like the idea of the national series because I think the purpose for it, especially in the beginning, was to help athletes that didn't necessarily have the financial support from a sponsor to go to like the World Series events, which are pretty far. Like if you're a US athlete, 3 of them are in Europe. If you're a European athlete, 2 of them are in the US. So if you are an athlete that doesn't have a sponsor that can help you get to these places, it makes it more local, but then you can still qualify for this final that this year will be in Italy. And I think that's awesome that they're like helping provide opportunities to athletes that maybe couldn't get to the World Series.
I 100% agree with that. Like, if this series was around when I first started trail running, this 100% would have been what I would have pursued, because again, with that support, kind of just getting your feet wet, and it clearly is learning the space and like this style of racing without having to potentially spend thousands of your own dollars to try and compete in the World Series. Because what's also awesome is the top 3 finishers at the final who are part of the national series get invited to participate in the World Series the following year. It's almost like, for lack of better comparison, it's like Major League Baseball, and then what is the other one?
Minor League
Baseball. Yeah. Because it's, again, just for lack of verbiage to use, because there are many, many runners in the minor league in this example that could very much compete and place in the top 10. But unfortunately, we live in this world where not everyone is, supported fully financially, especially when they're just starting to get their feet wet in the sport, or for one reason or another, they just haven't gotten that contract yet. And so I just think it's a really cool way to kind of blend those 2 groups of athletes. And also, life happens. And so maybe you are an athlete that has that support and can compete in the World Series, but this year you just like want to stay home for one reason or the other, and you still have a way to compete with that kind of top tier talent.
Yeah. And so this year, I'm just going to go through the US and Canada races, since that's where we are. For the national series, the races are Breakneck Point Half Marathon, which is on May 6th, Broken Arrow Sky Race 23K on June 16th, Quebec Mega Trail 25K on July 3rd, Pikes Peak Ascent, which is also part of the Golden Trail World Series. So you'll be racing some crazy European athletes as well. And the Mammoth Trail Fest in the weekend after that, which is also a part of the Golden Trail World Series.
Yes. So case in point, if you are an American competing in the Golden Trail National Series and you're placing like in the top 3 or top 5 of any of those races, please know that you can very much compete in the World
Series. Yeah,
you will be. You probably could even get in the top 5. So again, just like, it's cool because it provides that access for those athletes who don't necessarily have that support. And what's awesome is, for example, as an American athlete, if you go to, say, Mammoth Trail Fest and you win the whole damn thing, I am sure sponsors will be knocking on your door the very next day. So it's cool to have that exposure with this series.
Yeah, if you're winning that race, you're beating some really, really established trail athletes.
Yes. So then the World Series races are, you already mentioned these, right?
No.
Okay. So World Series races are Sakama, Mont Blanc. So Sakama is in Spain in May. Mont Blanc Marathon, or Marathon du Mont Blanc, that's June in Chamonix, France. That one is really cool because you get to be in Chamonix, whereas also the famous UTMB week with OCC, CCC, TDS. The Dolomites Sky Race, that's in Italy. That is a very well-known race in Europe. It's not necessarily, I would say, globally known, but you get tons of fans on that one, and you just go up these crazy switchbacks and you flip right around and then you descend this super gnarly terrain. And then Sierra Zanelles in Switzerland, that's basically like 2 VKs, and then you race at 7,000 feet for a half marathon.
Oh, yeah.
That's wild. Me and EmKay both had a rough time there last year.
Our Sierras in all 2022s were rough. Yeah. We'll be back for more someday.
We'll be back for more. But that was pretty rough. It also is notoriously can be warm some years. And then Pikes Peak, that's in Colorado.
Just the ascent.
Just the ascent, yes, which most Americans will know that race. And then Mammoth Trail Fest, that's a new addition this year, which is awesome. And that's actually in my hometown of Mammoth Lakes, California. So it's a really good mix. Sakama and Mont Blanc are both 4 hours and change races. And it's kind of nice that those are at the beginning of the season, so you could get them out of the way if you're participating in one, both, maybe neither. Dolomites is oddly really fast because there's some people that just bomb that very technical downhill. So if you are a person who's really good at technical downhill, that is your race. Sierre-Zinal is known as it's just like the Fast and the Furious, I think is what they call it. That's where Nike Brinkman was introduced to the trail running world a couple years ago, where she got second and just ran an insane race under 3 hours in her second trail race or something. Pikes Peak, again, that one's, you run up to 14,000 feet in a half marathon. So you could just see how they're all unique. And then Mammoth Trail Fest, I'm unsure with the courses this year, but you'll suspect it will include some Sierra Kitty litter, which oddly tears up your quads. You're basically running in like ankle deep, thick gravel sand.
Almost like surfing.
Yeah, it's almost like surfing, and it's fun. And you're like, oh, this is easy. And then 10 minutes pass and your legs are just tired. So that'll be really fun.
And that race starts at 7,000 feet also. So
yeah. So
the last two races are high altitude.
Yeah, high altitude. Sierre-Zinal is kind of high. And then, the rest are kind of, again, me and EmKay live pretty high. So take what we say high as with a grain of salt. And then you gain financial support kind of throughout the series. So what's interesting about this one, it's something that is tough, but I also really appreciate, is you have to apply to the series before the series even starts. And they look at your results. They look at your ITRA score or UTMB score, kind of figure out where potentially you will contribute to the series, as weird as that sounds, from like not only a personality aspect. Again, that sounds weird, but I know they take that into consideration. And then obviously from a competitive standpoint, which that trumps everything. And also whether or not you've competed in the series before. They do a really good job of supporting athletes who have done their races before and are coming back kind of as like reoccurring competitors that add to the story that is Golden Trail. And so after you submit your form, after the new year, they send out a big spreadsheet with everyone's names and which races, which also is just so weird to me. Like, I love it. I could see what races EmKay is potentially looking at. I could see what races Nike is looking at, which I kind of love, because you're like, oh shoot, if I go to Mont Blanc, this is who's going to be there. If I go to Sierre-Zinal, this is who's going to be there. So you kind of like know who you may see at what places. And so they'll divide up the support based on whether you're traveling from outside of Europe or within Europe. Usually it's some combination of transport and or accommodations. And that's kind of like the top tier level support. And then below that is you get a bib. And then what is the last one? It's like, transportation accommodations is the top tier. Yeah. Then the next tier is accommodations. Then the next tier below that is bib. And then the last one is just like, you get no support for that race at all. But the asterisk behind all this is that support is allotted to, again, the athletes who either already participated in the series, got top 20, or submitted their form and kind of work into the algorithm. You at any point can receive support if you place in the top 10. Yeah, I was going to say you experienced that.
Yeah, I came in to the Mont Blanc Marathon last year, having never competed in any of the Golden Trail World Series events. And so I got a free bib from the race, not necessarily from Mont Blanc, just for my score. And so I ended up finishing 9th in that race. And because I was top 10, I was provided support to get to the next race of my choosing, which was Sierre-Zinal, which was cool because I had not planned on doing Sierre-Zinal because I didn't have it didn't even occur to me that I could afford to go to Europe twice. But because I finished in the top 10, they helped me get to the next race. And then flip side of that, I did not do as well at Sears and All. I think I was like 28th maybe. And so I was not provided support for my next steps in the Golden Trail series because I had fallen out of the top 10.
Yeah, it's a bit cutthroat, which adds to that pressure. And going back to if you're a newer athlete in the space and you're trying to debate whether you should pursue your national series and get to the final that way or pursue the World Series. If you are better and you believe in yourself and you really do think you will be in that top 10 and you're like, all right, I'll bite the bullet this time, but from now on, I'll be getting support. Like, go for it. Like, it's so cool because then you'll be taking care of the rest of the series. But if you want to be more calculated, which that tends to be where my mind would go, is I would maybe then go to the national series, see how I do there. If you're in the US, you can do Pikes Peak, which kind of gives you the best of both worlds. But you kind of get where I'm going. It's like there's multiple paths to get in this series and try and get some form of support, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, they're very, very good about that. Yeah. And then I guess the only thing left to talk about with the Golden Trail is the final. How do you get there if you're in the World Series?
So if you are in the World Series, you are trying to get into the top 30. And in that way, if you end up in the top 30 rankings after the 6 races, and you did at least three of the Golden Trail races, then you are provided support. However, you could pull off, let's say an Ally Mack kind of did this last year, is you can do 2 races and still get into the top 30, which is very possible. Like you could get a first and a first, second, like you do the math, you figure it out. And you can go to the final and still compete for the prize money. You just won't be supported to go to the final. And I will say, like, again, just an evolution / progress of the series is when I did this series 2 years ago, you had to be in the top 10 to get support. So again, just like emphasizing how much support they're putting out there to really try and get like the best collection of athletes possible as they can. Obviously, athletes are attracted to other shoes for different reasons, but they're really trying to get as many people there as possible, whether you're sponsored or not sponsored or have support, don't have support, whatever that may look like.
And last year, the final was a 5-day stage race. This year, it will be a 5K time trial, and it's like a 25K or something.
Yeah. So basically 2 opposite sides of the spectrum. You either have 4 or 5 days of racing or a really fast sub ultra race. And the plan going forward is they'll alternate. So then 2024 will be a stage race again. 2025 will be I think they call it like a prelude and then the actual race.
Yeah. So another thing to consider when you're getting into Golden Trail stuff is like, do you want to compete in a year where they're doing a stage race, or do you want to compete in a year where they're doing just one race with a prelude, or do you like both of those options? This year it is one race with a prelude.
Yeah. And the last aspect is the prize money. So like we said, WMRA went 5,000, 3,000, 2,000, all the way to the top 10. Golden Trail pays out the top 20, which again, just kind of showing the progress with this series, because when I did it 2 years ago, it was only the top 10 got paid. So that's really cool and really exciting. And first place overall in the series is 15,000. Then it goes 10,000, 8,000, and then it gets less and less. With that being said, you could also pick up money at each individual race, which first place is 3,000, then it goes 2,000, 1,000, and I believe that pays out to the top
10.
Top 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is really cool.
Yeah. Races like Sears and All offer time bonuses. I think that's the only one that does. Pikes Peak Ascent was offering big money for a course record this year, and nobody broke it. So maybe they'll be offering money for a course record next year as well, or I guess this year. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities to make money in the Golden Trail series, which is nice.
Yeah. And what type of why would you recommend this series to people?
I think it's another one of those, actually, you know what? I have to think about this for a second. I think that the Golden Trail races suit people who are really good from like probably the half marathon distance to the marathon distance, because the races are a little bit longer. Like if you're a track athlete, you can definitely make the transition. But like Dani said, the first 2 races, you're out there for 4+ hours. Even Sierre-Zinal, which is one of the faster races, most women finish between 2 hours and 50 minutes to 3 hours and 20 minutes. So I would say definitely kind of more of your like half marathon to marathon athlete on the roads would be a really good transition into this on the trails.
Yeah, I would second that for sure. And to me personally, as an athlete who has done this the last couple years and saw the races this year, to see that the final is so short, like if you really want to go all in on the Golden Trail World Series, I feel like to be at your best, you almost skip the first 2 and you just focus on those shorter races. Again, this is my opinion, so take that with a grain of salt. But coming from an athlete who I think my sweet spot is 4 to 6 hour races, this was killing me for like the last 2 months or so, where I'm like, does it really benefit me to do Mont Blanc Marathon? It does, because that's my sweet spot. But like, I'm going to sacrifice a whole training block where I could be focusing on less than 2 hours type of strength and training.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a tough one. Another thing with the Golden Trail Series, which I think is opposite of WMRA from outside perspective, again, I haven't dove personally into WMRA too much, is there is a lot of media stuff going on constantly. So if you're a person who gets nervous or anxious with cameras and interviews and being asked to do photo shoots, etc., there's a very good chance you will be asked to do that at some point during this series. So maybe just kind of like figure out what your plan is going to be going to one of these races. They usually have an elite presentation. You may be signing stuff. Like, again, it's a lot going on. So learning how to like manage those emotions and deciding whether or not like this is the first series you do, especially if you're a new athlete.
Yeah, the one thing about the elite athlete presentation and stuff like that is that if you're new to the series, you're definitely way less likely to be required to do stuff like that. So if you're in like those kinds of things, more than likely you've been with the series for at least a season. So you kind of know what's expected and what the hype is like, because yeah, it definitely can be pretty overwhelming, especially because you're trying to get ready for a race and some people's headspaces are just totally not in that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I swear all these start lines are crazy.
Yes.
They'll be like banging drums and you'll be standing there for like 10 minutes and you'll hear like a countdown for like 5 minutes. I'm over exaggerating, but it's just a lot of hype.
The music is like tense.
Yeah, it's always like battle cries. It's like, oh, we're here. And there's someone on the microphone just hyping it up. So yeah, like, if you don't get the point, it's a lot. So just be ready for it when you're there.
Your heart rate will be elevated.
Your heart rate will be elevated. It'll feel like you're at Warped Tour when you're a middle schooler. There's a lot going on. Cool.
Oh man.
All right. You want to take skyrunning next?
Skyrunning. So I have not participated in any skyrunning events. Have you participated in any skyrunning
I have.
events?
Yes, I have. I did the US Skyrunning Championships as like my first trail year.
Yeah.
Which it was kind of interesting. I don't know if we still have a series anymore, but
I don't think we do.
Yeah, so it was like a very unique year. So I got like the skyrunning shirts and stuff from that year. But that same year, the Rut was part of the World Series. Cool. And I got second. And sometimes when I'm in Europe, people will be like, oh, World Skyrunning second. And that's the only World Skyrunning race I've ever done. Oh, wait, I did another one, but that one just went really bad. But yeah, so I technically have participated, but it's been a minute.
So skyrunning is typically very technical, which is why I have not done a skyrunning race, because I have these little bird ankles that just like anytime I try to do anything super technical. But the skyrunning series is 13 races. The first one is April 29th. The last one in regular season is October 7th. It happens across 8 countries. And then they have a final sometime, I think it was in November, called Sky Masters. And to qualify for Sky Masters, you have to be in the top 30 general season ranking. So out of those 13 races, we had a really hard time. We couldn't find exactly how you got your points for this series, but so you have to be in the top 30 within the general season. Another way to qualify is to be in the top 30 out of the whole year, or their 52-week rankings. So I don't know if that means like if you didn't race as often this season, but maybe you had an outstanding season last year and like literally nobody passed you up because you won everything last year, then you're still able to qualify. You have to be a top 10 at a super sky race or top 5 at a sky race. And any winner of a nominated race for a Skyrunner National Series automatically makes it to the Sky Masters. And the winner of the final ranking of the Skyrunner National Series, those two are confusing to me because they sound exactly the same. Dani, what is your take on how to qualify for the Skyrunning Sky Masters? Because, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. The last two sound the same, just like worded differently. I'm sure maybe there's like another ranking that exists somewhere. But again, we just want to point out this one was hard to like find information on, which was kind of weird. Like I wish it was more straightforward and just all in one space. And that's also part of the reason that we're doing this episode in the first place, is that we feel like a lot of these series can be like convoluted, or it's just like if you're not on the in, maybe you like have a hard time finding this information, but even we are having a hard time finding information on some of these series. 100%. And yeah, WMRA was also hard to find, but I found some stuff because I had gotten an email. So that's an example where I got some inside information and then it helped clarify these questions that we had. Golden Trail is actually pretty good, except for the support aspect.
Yeah.
I know personally some friends who missed that window to try and get support. And so that is like a confusing aspect. So if you're just finding the series now, you're kind of shit out of luck because that's already been determined. So I think
you just have to go to a race and get top 10 at that point.
Exactly. So as you could see, like there's still room for improvement with all these series. Skyrunning is just a little tougher.
Yeah. And neither of us are a part of the series, so we haven't gotten any emails or anything that we could share with you guys. So
exactly.
We're still a little confused on this one, but be in the top 30 of the season general ranking.
Yeah. And this one is interesting to me because this is by far the longest season for a series. Most of the series start so the next one would probably be Golden Trail, which is Sagama. Sagama got moved up this year because of the World Championships, and they were realizing that athletes were struggling to choose one race or the other. And Sagama is Sagama, as they say, and so they didn't want that. So they actually moved it up a week. But normally that would start the 3rd week of May. And then WMRA starts in June. And so this one starting in April 29th gives you a pretty long season, which is kind of nice. So if you're an athlete struggling to decide which series to do, you could get a head start on skyrunning, do a couple races early season and, like adjust your training, or maybe you're an athlete who likes to race more frequently and kind of like sprinkle this throughout your schedule. And then the thing also to note with skyrunning, especially if you're new to the sport, is don't look so much at the distances. Do your homework. Go look at the results from the previous year, because yes, technically by definition, a lot of these are sub-ultra races. They're under 50K. However, a 30K or 25K can easily take you 4 to 5 hours because the terrain is so difficult and technical. And most of the time you're going up to a skyline, which I think is where they get this phrase sky running from. And you're navigating the skyline and you have to get back down.
Yeah. And a note about skyrunning as well is that there aren't any races in the US. The closest, at least for the 2023 season, is in Canada, the Minotaur Sky Race. So most of them are in Europe.
Yeah.
So a little bit more difficult to get to.
Yeah. So if you're newer to the sport, this one is not as accessible, which is such a bummer. In the past, I really think the only race they've had in the US is the Rut, which is in September. And the Rut is already amazing as its own. From my understanding, they kind of like that. And so they're kind of just like sticking the Rut is the Rut and not associated with any series, which is unfortunate because I do think there are a lot of runners in the US who would do really great in this series. People that I've seen that, maybe they don't like the races where you're running as much, as weird as that's to say, but like just like that quicker kind of road speed translating. And they really do like that traditional mountain scrambling aspect. And this is right up their alley. And it's unfortunate that you have to travel, not just from like an environmental standpoint, but like a money like support standpoint, which isn't great.
The big thing to note about skyrunning this year is that they have upped their prize money quite significantly. We couldn't find an exact breakdown, but it's 100,000 euros in prize money for the top 10. And then all includes the top 10, and then 20,000 euros in prize money for series champions.
Yeah, which is more than the Golden Trail. Which in my opinion was kind of a response to Golden Trail, and that just like gaining traction and fandom. To me, skyrunning kind of was at its height right before the pandemic a little bit. It seemed like still the series that a lot of, when we say top athletes, it's more of like the majority of top athletes. So if you take a top 20 ranking, where are 15 of that top 20 going? Because skyrunning still has some incredible runners who pursue that series, who cross over into other series as well. And so, yeah, that's just what I mean when I say that, like, where is a majority of that top tier athletes going? And so, yeah, I think that was kind of a response to them. I feel like I saw a breakdown at some point where then each of the following places in that prize money are less than the Golden Trail. So if you're an athlete trying to weigh, well, potentially I can make more if I pursue that. Think, what if you're 6th in skyrunning, you might be making significantly less than you would be in the Golden Trail.
Yeah. So you're making more as a winner, but are you making more 2nd through 10th?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And obviously not everything is about money, but if you're someone who's fully pro and that is part of your income, that might be something that you have to take into consideration. But anyone who is just getting new to the sport, I say try at least one skyrunning race at least one time in your life and just see if you like it. It is a wild experience. I will let you tell you that.
Yeah, if you're like a mountain athlete, like somebody who really enjoys like climbing, skiing, like stuff like that, you like to be on top of mountains and not really sure if you're going to fall or not, this is for you.
This is for you. That should be the advertisement.
Yeah. If you like to run, maybe not so much.
Yeah. I would say there's very, very few people who can run the skyrunning races. And those are usually people that are winning.
And it's Kilian Jornet and Kilian Jornet.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So the last series that we're going to talk about in this episode is the Cirque series. And we actually hope to maybe do like a bigger Cirque series episode one of these days, but it's not necessarily a series that has like a final like the rest of these do, but it does have like final prize money, which is why we wanted to highlight it. And so the Cirque series has 7 races. 6 of them are in the US. One of them is in Switzerland, which they started last year and are continuing this year. And they break down the divisions a little differently. They have a pro division, an expert division, and a sport division. So pro is kind of held out for like sponsored athletes. Expert is anybody who's still really good, but maybe not sponsored. And sport is just everybody else. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Dani, but I'm pretty sure that's kind of how they break it down.
Yes.
And yeah, do you want to talk about the final prize money and stuff like that?
Yep. So Cirque Series is $1,000 for the winners of each race for the expert and the pro. So this is if you go to Brighton, then first place gets $1,000, and then second place
through third, right?
Through third, yeah, top three. And I've done one Cirque Series race, but it's pretty cool. Like they do like a cool podium. Sometimes I see them like they'll have some swag depending on the race sometimes. But it's really cool. And then the overall leader of the series at the end of the series gets $3,000.
Yeah.
And I believe it goes 3, 2, 1.
No, it was like 3,000 and then it was like 500 and 400. So it really paid to win the overall ranking at the end. And for those of you guys who don't know what Cirque Series races are like, they are kind of along the line of like sky running, but like pretty short, usually 7 miles long, up a ski resort, down a ski resort. And they're really fun. I also have not run one, but my husband ran one this summer and it looked awesome. I would say it's a really good, way to get into the sport, especially if you're coming out of college and you're still training for those shorter events, but you want to like check out the mountain running scene and still be in the US. There are a lot, 6 races in the US. I think they're all during the summer, like June through August. So you're not in school and they're very fast. So that's probably maybe the easiest way to get into the sport as a younger athlete in the US right now, in my opinion.
Totally. Or just like coming into the sport in general too. What's nice about them is a lot of them are at ski resorts, or maybe all of them are.
I think they all are.
And so that does add this kind of layer of feeling safe because you're in one spot. So like, gosh forbid something happened, you're pretty accessible because you're within like a ski resort place versus, picking some race where maybe you go out into some areas that are not as accessible and you lose service with your cell phone and stuff like that. So I do really like that aspect of them. For my own parents, these are races that I've usually recommended. I'm like, yeah, you could hike up to the top of the ski resort and then, walk down or something like that. And I just have seen they have a really cool atmosphere too, like in person. They have videos and just lots of swag, and they'll have like different vendor booths and stuff like that too. To me, this is like almost the medium between WMRA and skyrunning, where it kind of like has a couple aspects of both. And then especially if you're in North America or America, like EmKay said, like, it's because they're at ski resorts, most of them are pretty easy to get to.
Yeah,
pretty accessible. So you can fly to Salt Lake and, go do the ones in Utah, etc. So I think that's really cool about them.
Yeah. So the races in the Cirque Series are Snowbird, Brighton, Alyeska, which is in Alaska, Alta, Targhee, which is in
Wyoming,
like the Jackson Hole area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A Basin. And then the one in Switzerland is called Engelberg. And the season is from July 1st through September 9th in the US. And then the one in Switzerland is September 23rd.
That's awesome. So their season is pretty short. And how I've seen athletes incorporate these into their schedules before is they're really good tune-ups for those European races. Like they're like EmKay said, they're short, they're punchy, they're really fast. So if you're someone who's like wanting to test out your legs in Europe in some bigger races, like these are great races to utilize. I've seen Ali Mack use them. Janelle Lynx has crushed them. Ashley Brosvin, this was like one of her first races.
Joe Gray.
Joe Gray uses them. Grayson Murphy. We've mentioned them before, but like Sam Henry, like they're just so good to potentially use as like that last harder effort before potentially doing like 2, 3, 4 hours.
Yeah, I think that's where Sam Hendry and Sophia Lockley both kind of got their trail legs under them.
Sophia Lockley, throw another name in
races. There. Yeah.
Cirque Series is the way to go.
Cool.
That's awesome.
I think that's all we have on Cirque Series, though.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get Julian on at some point before the series starts, just so you can hear it from the horse's mouth himself about the series and what it is he's looking to accomplish with it, etc.
Yeah. So hopefully we have helped you guys navigate some series confusion, and we will include as many links as we possibly can in the show notes here so that you guys can fact check us on all these series.
Yeah. What for someone who's trying to pick which series to pursue, what components of the series do you think they should consider? Not saying which one you would pick yourself. Yeah.
I think for me, accessibility is probably number one. Based on where you live, what series has the most races that you can get to without having to spend a lot of money. And then after that, maybe, I don't know, I would say, like, what does it do for you in terms of your, like, what are your goals in the sport? Are your goals to like get a sponsor and be really kind of out there, or are your goals just to like crush local mountains? But yeah, I think accessibility for me is probably the big one if you're looking into series and what you want to get started with.
Yeah, 100%. I would second that with accessibility. Again, it depends on where you are with your journey in the sport, what you're looking to get out of it. If you're trying to be a pro, are you someone who could care less? You're just out there. Not that the pros don't have fun, but you're just there to have fun and check that off the bucket list. And so are you cool with going to Switzerland for a 6-mile race? Or do you want to go to Switzerland and do a longer race? Or do you want to go to Switzerland and maybe shit your pants because this course is so scary, but it's this life elevating experience? Like those are the types of things that maybe you want to consider if you're going to spend that much money traveling. Yeah. Your development and goals, I 100% on board with that too, because again, like we said, Cirque Series, maybe less than an hour that you're out there. Zagama, you're close to 4.5 hours. That's a big difference. And so trying to figure out what you're trying to get out of the sport. And then for me, like I personally chase competition. And so that's a bit tough because you're kind of trying to figure out what your perspective of what is the most competitive. Do you want to race the best person in the sport where maybe that's the only person that's at the race? These aren't real examples. That's just like a theoretic example. And potentially get second? Or do you want to get, or not want to get, but if you get 10th in like a super stacked race and you get everything out of yourself, like when you walk away from the finish line that day, what is going to help you feel most satisfied that you did what you're out here and wanting to do? So that's another thing for me, which is tough. And I feel like prize money has some aspects with that.
Yeah.
Maybe some incentives in other ways too.
And I would say, I guess we can open ourselves up a little bit for this, but ask questions. I had no idea what I was doing last year. And I just spent the whole season like DMing people like Dani and being like, where am I supposed to be? What is competitive? Like, am I going to have fun here? What is going on? Ask questions because everybody's confused.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. I personally, I love getting questions like from EmKay. Grayson had hit me up when she first was in the sport. And through that, I feel like word has gotten around that I love sharing because personally, like I had a really tough time when I joined the sport. I felt like not a lot of people were open to sharing like where they were going. And it was a bit tough because I was trying to figure it out. So I just did a bunch of races with really no rhyme or reason. And I kind of like learned through trial and error. So I just love sharing that knowledge with people. But yeah, in the end, like whatever is going to get you most fired up when you're training, I think is the biggest thing. And what you're going to be happiest with at the end of the year on what you pursued. And yeah, that's different for every person. So just trying to figure that out for yourself, I think, is the number one thing, actually.
Yeah. Don't follow too many people around.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, yeah, we'll put links in the show notes, and you guys can ask us some questions if you want to. If you're part of the Freetrail family, you can ask us in the Slack, which is probably the most effective way because it's easier to weed out than maybe on Instagram. But thanks for joining us for this journey today.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Sub Hub podcast, a Freetrail podcast.